I'm sweating. Sorry.
It's really nice to meet you, Sandy. I really enjoyed reading your book excerpts and
Thank you
writing.
so much. Thank you so much. I'm glad you did.
Good evening, friends. I am Paridhi Singh from Tell Me Your Story. I welcome you this evening for a discussion on the book Rising 30 Women Who Changed India. I'm privileged to be in the company of our author, Kiran Manral. Tell Me Your Story calls for registration to the writing program Season 6 in association with Rupa Publications. To participate in this writing workshop, you must register by 15th May. Just a little bit of a pitch, but let me now begin by introducing our author here, Ms. Kiran Manral. She's an author, TEDx speaker, columnist, and mentor. Kiran Manral, in previous avatars, has been a journalist, researcher, festival curator, and entrepreneur. She has published several books across different genres, including in fiction, and has also published non-fiction works in the space of parenting and true stories. She's received multiple awards such as the Women Achievers Award by Young Environmentalists Association, the International Women's Day Award 2018 from Indian Council for UN Relations, supported by the Ministry of Women and Child Welfare, Government of India, for excellence in the field of writing and Women Innovator 1000 Women of Asia 2021, and the list does go on. In 2022, she was named amongst the 75 iconic Indian women in STEAM by Red Dot Foundation and Beyond Black, in collaboration with the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor, Government of India, and British High Commission, New Delhi. She lives in Mumbai with her family and can be reached out on Twitter at kiranmanwal.com. So really do follow her as soon as possible. I'm going to talk a little bit about the book now, and then we'll launch straight into questions with our esteemed guest today. So, a bit about the book, Rising. With stories of 30 amazing contemporary Indian women, this book looks at what shaped them, the challenges they faced, the influences they had, the choices they made, and how they negotiated around or broke the boundaries that sought to confine them, either through society or circumstance. From diverse backgrounds, different generations, they have risen through sheer grit, determination, bolstered with passion, and are today names to look up to hold out as examples to the next generation of young women and girls, giving them courage to reach out to their dreams. From politics to sport, from the creative and performing arts to cinema and television, from business leaders to scientists, legal luminaries, and many more. This book features the stories of these much celebrated, fabulous women such as Sushma Swaraj, Sheila Dikshit, Fatima Bibi, Maheshwata Devi, Amrita Shergill, Amrita Pritam, Sonal Mansingh, Lata Mangeshkar, and I will say each of them because they each deserve that recognition. Anita Desai, M.S. Shubhalakshmi, Harita Kaur Deol, Madhuri Dixit, Bachendri Paul, Rekha Chavi Rajawat, Karnam Maleshwari, Shailaja Teacher, Hima Das, Naina Lal Kudwai, Shakuntala Devi, P.T. Usha, P.V. Sindhu, Ekta Kapoor, Kiran Bedi, Mary Kom, Menka Guruswamy, Chatri Thomas, Aparna Sen, Kiran Mazumdar Shaw, and Gayatri Devi, among others. So, thank you so much for very patiently listening to our introduction. Now, to you, Kiran, and I'd really like to start our discussion today with this question, which is what is the significance of the word rising in your book title, Rising 30 Women Who Changed India?
It's a very interesting question you asked, Paridhi. When I was asked to suggest a name for the book, we came up with a lot of options. And somehow I thought that we have still not risen as women. We are still in the process of finding ourselves, and it has been centuries through which Indian women are finding their strength and finding their voices. And we've had women who have broken whatever shackles have been set upon them down the centuries. But still, even today, we read about honor killings, we read about women not being allowed to dress in a certain way, we read about moral policing, we have all kinds of harassment and trolling happening, women being auctioned off on apps. We're still rising, we're still finding our voices, and I think that's why I wanted to call it rising because we've still to find our place up there. We're still in the process of reaching out and finding a place under the sun.
That's so insightful. Thank you for sharing that. And I do feel that sentiment that yes, we are still rising. The journey is not over. It's very much ongoing. How did you go about casting the inspiring women to feature in your book?
There can never be a definitive list of 30 women who changed India. Everyone will have a different opinion on whether this name should have been included, why was this name left out,
Mhm.
and this name should definitely have featured and not been left out, or this woman had no business being in the book. So there are opinions galore, and there are many, many women I wish I could have included, but then that would have been like thousands of women who changed India. The list would go on forever. But having said that, it was quite a long process because the publishers, my editor Shashwati Bora at Rupa, and me, we went through. We all. I put down a list of names, many. I think lots and lots and lots of names, and they discussed the names and they shortlisted some names that they thought should be in the book. I came back with some names that I felt that should be in the book, and it was a lot of back and forth before we finally arrived at this. One thing I think I was very clear about, and I think I'm very grateful to Shashwati and Rupa for having allowed me this indulgence, was that I did not want names that were all already very well known. So if you look in the book, if you go through the book as you've been through it, you see there are some names we've never heard about, but their iconic achievements are something that has just been forgotten by history and been glossed over. Somebody like a Harita Cordial, right? Somebody like a Fatima Bibi, who's so iconic, but hardly anybody of the current generation might know about her. So I was very clear that I wanted names. Of course, you have your Rekha, you have your Madhuri Dixit, you have Lata Mangeshkar. These names will hopefully draw in the readers, but I hope they will also read the Harita Cordial and the Fatima Bibi and get to know the life behind, icons like MS Subbulakshmi. So that was my aim behind the list of names that I chose. And
I
there
don't
had to be a mix. Sorry, Paridhi, I'm just
know.
adding that I think I also sought for a mix between arts, entertainment, uh, culture, performing arts, also, law, business, the corporate world, and politics. So I was very clear that there needed to be a cross section across all kinds of women from every strata. Somebody who came from an underprivileged background, as well as somebody who was born into terrible affluence, like Maharani Gayatri Devi. So I tried to balance that out. Somebody like Bachendri Pal, who came from a village and in very dire circumstances. And you also have Gayatri Devi, who was the Maharani of Jaipur. So that's what I tried to do.
Thank you. I'm really not envious of the task you had to undertake, but I think you've done a commendable job, like you said, of you capturing women not just from one but several backgrounds, generations, and I think that means more people in India they can speak to as role models depending on where we all come from and our backgrounds. You refer to the battles women fight each day, whether for daily bread on the streets or equal pay in corporate offices. What are the qualities possessed by women, and Indian women in particular, which enable them to continue fighting these battles each day?
I think the urge to be heard, the urge to have your voice heard is something that we all fight every day. If you've been a, I mean, we all are women, of course, if you've been is a bad choice of words. If you've been in a corporate space, you know that very often the conversation happens to the man in the room, right? The woman is generally seen as, especially if you're a younger woman, you're seen as somebody who's just accompanying the senior. And that's a battle I think even Naina Lal Kidwai spoke about, that they would speak to the men in the room and not address her. They found it very awkward to address her when she was doing these very high powered meetings and brokerings and negotiations. And she was the first female MBA from Harvard, from India. So, a woman of that level facing that kind of prejudice. So I think as Indian women, we have been taught how to shrink ourselves, how to make ourselves less visible, to take up less space, to speak softer, to be quieter, to be well behaved. And this whole process of unlearning all these things is what helps us find our voice. I think I'm very proud of the current generation, which is very strong and very determined, and I think has already found their voice.
Thank you. That's again really um, heartfelt, and I echo that. I feel that there is certainly a generational difference, and I think it's for the better. But I still feel, like you said at the start, we're rising. The
We're
journey.
rising. Yes, it's still rising.
Whose story did you most relate with, and what was the reason for that?
To be honest, I think Anita Desai,
Hmm.
because Anita Desai began her writing, but she wrote in the spaces of being a housewife. And she carved out time when her children were at school and when her domestic duties were done. So her writing always got done in that kind of intervals of time. And for the longest time, her children didn't know she was a writer and an author. While my son does know that I'm a writer and author, I do carve out my writing time from domesticity. And it's a battle to find the creative space and the time that you need to do your work because it's not considered important enough work, right? It's something that you do when you find the gaps. So I think Anita Desai, I identified with the strongest as but if you ask me who I admired the most, I would say Mahashweta Devi,
Hmm.
because she lived a very iconoclastic life, and to survive on writing, as we all of us writers know, is very difficult unless you're a J.K. Rowling.
And we know even J.K. Rowling struggled for the longest time.
Initially,
Yes,
yeah, she
yeah,
did.
or yeah,
When she made it, yeah.
yeah. What do you think we could do as a society to make these battles easier for women who are fighting them, whom we know in our lives? So our sisters, our friends, our mothers.
See, all I say is if you have climbed up the ladder, don't pull it up behind you. Put your hand out and pull up somebody else. So that's what I try to do. That's what Coral is trying to do with Tell Me Your Story. That's what I think a lot of us senior writers are trying to do with young aspiring writers. Help them. Or in other, this is I'm speaking purely in the space of literature and writing. But in other ways, I think the best you can do is to be an ally. The best you can do is be a sounding board. You can be available. You can be a mentor. You can be a guide. You can just be somebody who gives somebody a direction in which to move. Also, I think what is very important and what we don't really consider is the allyship of men,
Hmm.
to make men who are allies to the movement, to raise boys to be more equitable, to understand the fact that gender parity and gender equality are not just phrases in a civics textbook, and that they have to be implemented in your day-to-day life as well. So raise your boys better, educate the men who are too grown up to be raised like husbands and brothers, teach them how they can be allies to the women in their lives and how they can support women. It can be little things, it can be simple things as to division of housework, being more accepting of irregular working hours, uh, not being judgmental about clothing, not being, policing a woman over her decisions or whatever it is. Maybe from something as small as why you wearing that short skirt to boy, why you dating that boy. I mean, give a woman the courage of her own decisions and her agency, and don't seek to police the women in your life. I think that's what we need to keep telling the men around. And that's about it. I think a lot of us are losing the fact. I had this discussion just the other day at Kunzam Cafe in Gurgaon where we discussed everyday feminism. And I keep hearing from a lot of women that I'm not a feminist. And in the word feminist itself has become a pejorative. And I wonder why that is so. Why you not, what is it about feminism that you don't want? Do you not want the right to vote? Do you not want the right to education? Do you not want the right to own property? Do you want to be considered property of your husband or your father? These are, do you not want equal pay? Do you not want agency over your body and birth control right? Look at what is happening in the USA right now. So, I mean, what part of feminism do you all not want? I mean, why would you say I'm not a feminist? Do you want to go back to that? So, these are battles that have been fought very hard by previous generations. And by, just simply saying, I am not a feminist, I don't think I'm a feminist, you are sitting on privilege when you say that. You are sitting on the privilege of not knowing what the women went through when they fought for these battles. So I think one of the things we also need to do is educate women on what the feminist movement has brought them and given them. And maybe then they will understand why they need to keep fighting the fight. The fight is not over yet. If a country like USA could reverse bodily agency over reproduction for a woman, this, I mean, that's very scary. What could happen to the rest of the world? I mean, we consider them, a first world country and whatever. What could happen in the rest of the world? So these are not battles we have to stop fighting.
Thank you for that very
Very long answer.
no, very very thorough a sort of appraisal of the status quo. Like I feel quite empathetic to the cause of feminism because I feel its complexity somewhere has made it difficult for people to understand what lies at its heart and like you said, have the privilege to be able to say I'm not a feminist and I suppose my personal feeling is also that we're living in a very fragile world order. So if we don't protect for what we have, we're likely to lose it. So it's so important to be, like you said, active allies, not just passive allies, but to actively try to help women in our lives and also be better allies to the cause of feminism, whether we are women or men. And actually, just kind of taking a little bit, like probing this a bit deeper, if you don't mind, just for a second. How do you foresee like stories of women that have been featured in your book helping the cause of allyship or true allyship as well? Because I feel we haven't had strong female heroines to look up to in the mainstream education we've all been given since childhood.
Yes, who do we have? We have Jhansi Ki Rani, we have Sarojini Naidu, we have who else? Rani of Chittor, we might have Annie Besant.
Yes.
Who else is there in our education system? I'm trying to think of names that were there in my Razia Sultan, names that were there in my history textbooks. Apart from these, we've had very few women that we've learned about formally in the education system. I don't know if this has changed in recent times. The curriculums have been upgraded a fair bit since the time I was in school. It's over 40 years now. So I hope it has been upgraded and more women have been added in. But yeah, uh, I honestly feel that unless you put stories of women achievers out there, not just for girls to read, but also the boys.
Mm,
Why are we saying the girls need icons and role models? Definitely they do, but also the boys need to have female role models and icons. And we've seen throughout history that women constantly keep getting erased. A woman actually wrote the code that sent the astronauts to the moon, and that was like a huge ass code. It was like as tall as her. But who do we hear about? We hear about Neil Armstrong. We hear about so the by giving women a voice, by talking about their stories, we give other women to know that their stories are also, the courage to say that my story is important. Whatever it is, maybe I've just started a small business of my own and I'm an entrepreneur, but now I'm self sufficient and I'm sustaining my family. That's a huge achievement. These are small achievements which should be lauded as much as the big achievements because it definitely takes courage and it takes gumption to break out of kind of social conditioning that confines you towards what is not reaching out, I think. Just giving women the courage to reach out. So, and to speak their truth. So, stories of women, I think, are very, very important. They need to be mainstreamed more. We need to talk about them more. There are some women who get talked about all the time, but there are some women with equally strong achievements who don't get talked about at all. And I hope we can begin conversations on their stories, and I hope we start finding them and talking more about them.
I hope so too. I would love nothing more. What are the promises and prospects of feminism in India, do you think?
What are the, I didn't get the first part of your question.
The promises and prospects of feminism in India.
I think the same as it is in the rest of the world. We are still running on a treadmill. We have won some rights and we are still fighting for other rights. The gender pay disparity is still a huge issue. Women are resigning en masse from the workforce, especially during the pandemic, because there is no equitable division of chores in the house, and it's very difficult. So that all boils down to attitudes towards housework and division of chores and child rearing and elder care, and all this always comes to the head of the woman. So in addition to being a working professional and being on par with the males in the workforce, she has to carry the double duty of doing all the heavy lifting in the at the home. So it's like the said of Ginger Astor and Fred Rogers. She did everything that Fred did, but backwards and in high heels. So that's what women are doing. So feminism in India really has to fight. I think we need something like the Icelandic mass strike of women. If you know about this, in uh, in Iceland,
Oh no, sorry, I'm
women,
not aware. Yeah.
yeah, I think it was the 1970s, if I'm not mistaken, in Iceland, all the women went on a massive strike demanding equal pay, equal work hours, and equitable distribution of chores. And after this mass strike of all the women, and they're a small nation, so it was possible. It's more difficult for a country like India, I would imagine. After this, I think Iceland is one of the most equitable countries in the world, or perhaps the most equitable countries in the world in terms of gender values and gender expectations and everything. So, these are battles we still have to fight, Paridhi. But right now, there are other things also that are more urgent and are more violent, and we are still fighting those.
Yes. I actually empathize with the kind of notion of how women are always wearing multiple hats and simultaneously trying to take care of domestic life but also work life, and especially in today's world where I feel there is a greater like zeal in a lot of women to make both work. They want to be successful like mothers and wives, but at the same time they want to be successful CEOs in companies. So for me, I must admit, before a book like yours, a lot of my role models were women like you who would I know from my friend circle who are trying to make it work. They are trying to make their family work and they're trying to make their corporate work. And I always had a little bit more respect because I knew my dad wasn't probably doing as much in the house, but my mom was doing
Much more.
managing a job and also trying to take care of us, take us to lessons. So this is such a like important thing I suppose like that we have role models all around us, and I'm so glad that in your book you've given spotlight also to those we might not necessarily hear of all the time, but actually those stories are inspiring, especially to young children, whether you're a boy or a girl, and to see those similarities perhaps in the women you might know in your personal life as well. So thank you for sharing that. I suppose it must have been quite the journey to work on such an important book with celebrated names from art, business, literature. I must have required real careful thought and consideration in terms of how to present the content and what to include. So please just tell us about your publishing journey with Rupa and how the whole editorial process went.
So I had a very kind and gracious editor who allowed me a longer deadline that I had earlier been given, because in the midst of all this we had a COVID strike and everything went off gear. Okay, my hair's a mess again. Everything went off gear, and I kept dithering and dattering, and It wasn't a good space to be in because we were all in lockdown and I couldn't reach out to people and there was no house help and all that rubbish was happening. Once all that was put behind us, I reached out for my interviews. I managed to get a few. Some, of course, had sadly passed away, so there was no question of getting interviews. I had to do secondary research on them. And the research process done, everything done. My research document itself was some 15 lakh words, I think. I condensed. I began writing out the narratives, and my manuscript was done. Submitted it. My editor calls back. We can't have a 2 lakh word book. Please cut it down to 80,000. So there was further chopping and chopping and chopping, and yet being very careful that that I retain the references and I retain all everything that is in the book comes from a source and comes from a reference. Nothing is conjecture. Nothing is opinion. Nothing is me passing judgment. I'm very clear about it that the book is not my opinion on these women. It is their stories, and I have to treat them with the respect and the dignity that their stories deserve because it is not my story to tell, right? It's their story. And I have to be empathetic towards them and their journeys. So if you've noticed in the book, there's completely no judgment. There are some funny areas, but there's no judgment. It's just the facts presented as they are. And you never know the circumstances of each person. Like Sonal Mansingh said in the interview, it's not for me to give judgment. Everybody has to take their own, to give advice. Everyone has to take their own decisions. Uh, so once that was done, Shastri went through it with the eagle eye and she sort of tightened it a bit. And of course, I had to cut it further. And I had a wonderful editor, Manali Das, who went through it with an even sharper eagle eye, I would say, and sort of nitpicked over the little things and the things that were not matching and the things were not coming through. And with so many references and so many 30 women, it was quite a task, but a very fulfilling task, I would say. And the cover, of course, when it came, it was the first cover I saw and it was brilliant. And there was no thinking that this could not be the cover. So Amrita did a brilliant cover. Amrita Chakravarti.
Thank you. And I must have, like just say that for the benefit of the audience as well. It really, each story does feel like such a neutral telling of the lives of these women, and that gap actually is delightful as a reader because you can fill it with your own conception of what you felt you could take away from each story. So really, it's written in a very kind of neutral but at the same time respectful way, which is quite unique. Um, can I please request you, as we near the sort of end of our Q&As, to please read out a brief passage of your choice from the book?
Oh, oh, I'm so sorry. My book is somewhere else. Why don't you read it out?
Yeah. Sorry?
My book is not here with me. So
Okay.
would you like to read out a passage if you have a copy with you? I'm
Um,
com- I'm
I
completely out of copies, to be
no,
honest.
that's okay. Uh, I think we can then, in this instance, probably let me see if I can dig up my copy. So I have it right in front of me, and I remember there is a bit uh, that I will try to find.
I've
So,
just given out all the copies I have. So I actually have no copies. I need to sit and order some copies.
so, by way of sort of background, I am a practicing lawyer in the UK. So when I read a bit about Miss
Uh,
Fatima TV,
okay,
yeah,
fine.
yeah, Lady Justice. It really touched me because I must confess I did my undergraduate law studies in India at Jindal Global Law School. And I never came across her even once in my 5 years of legal education.
Okay,
So it was
okay.
a bit of a surprise and a moment of sort of, I had to take a pause and understand that, oh, there are even within the legal world, I have not come across a heroine. And when I read her story, it really like was amazing. So I suppose like from that chapter there is uh, I suppose like yeah, the end of her career was a little bit like challenging towards the end of her career because there were sort of certain accusations that were made against her. And I remember that in a later interview to Scroll, and it says here, and I'm reading now. Of the decision to swear Jayalalitha in as Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu and the ensuing controversy, Ms. Fatima Bibi said in a later interview to Scroll.in, she was acquitted and had no charges of corruption at the time I appointed her. I had even consulted Supreme Court judges before considering it, and they all agreed with me. I talked to Fali Nariman, I talked to Chief Justice Ahmadi, all of them agreed. I had legal opinion also for these things. I did not do anything spontaneously or randomly. I thought about it, I've worked on it, and then only I have taken the decision. But views differ. I didn't want to continue there when some conflict arose, so I just resigned and came back. And then when the paragraph ends, you've written, this was an ignominious close to a glorious career that made her the first female judge and the first Muslim woman at the Supreme Court. And this paragraph stood out for me because I felt you would have had such a difficult job in which paragraph to pick from what Miss Bibi said at the time to quote in relation to her circumstance. But for me, the choice you had made here reveals so much about her. She was not someone who would rush to a judgment. She would think about it. She would consider different viewpoints presented. But there is such poise in her explanation. It's not defensive. If anything, it is exactly like the stories you write. It's neutral. It tells what her side of the story was. And she's given that space when she's acknowledged she resigned that I'm going to let others judge what happened rather than continuing to
Begin.
say, yeah. But I just wonder if you have anything else to add as well.
When I write the stories of their journeys, my empathy will be purely with my subject.
Mm.
I will try to present the circumstances from their point of view because I'm telling their stories, right? I'm not telling it as an outsider. I'm trying to present their point of view. So there have been controversial incidents in some other women's lives as well. But if you've gone through the book and you know there are certain women where there have been certain controversies. But my job is to purely say that this happened and this is why she did what she did, and it is not for us to judge. It is not our job to judge. It is our job to just accept that this is what happened at that point of time. And but despite that, despite whatever the decision, whether we might agree, not agree, they have the women have created their mark, and we must respect and admire them for what they have done and what they've achieved. So through everything, my aim is purely to say that this woman has achieved this, and we give her the due respect that her achievement deserves.
Thank you so much, Kiran. And with that, we come to the end of our questions. It's been a delight to just speak to you and a pleasure to have this time with you. So thank you so much for the very insightful conversation and for your time this evening. I would just like to remind everyone who's listening and still with us that Tell Me Your Story is calling for registrations for the Writing Program Season 6 in association with Rupa Publications. I was a participant of the Season 5 and I cannot endorse the program enough. Um, so yeah, please, 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 if you want to really like enjoy a program where you can immerse yourself in a creative space, then I cannot recommend this enough. To participate in this writing workshop, you must register by 15th May. So please share this message along. And till then, stay well, stay safe, happy reading, and happy writing. Wish you all a very good evening and see you all again soon.